Of course, only one thing really has overshadowed all of our minds really in the build-up to this Test match, and that was the really sad news, unexpected news, of course, too, of last week when Bill Frindall, our friend and colleague, and a man who's worked on Test Match Special for 42 years, of course, died last week. Desperate shock, I'm sure, for his family, his wife Debbie, who of course is very much in our thoughts as well. So what we are going to do in this lunch break is to reflect on Bill's life, the fun that we had with him, those contributions. It was so much more than simply a score, of course, and I'm sure that'll be reflected over the next half an hour or so. We'll be joined during that time by Peter Baxter, of course, a long-time producer here at Test Match Special. Henry Blofeld will be dropping in from London as well. Rory Bremner will be also joining us from the studio. Victor's going to be here with me. But first, let's listen to some typical Frindallian contributions from his 42 years of Test Match Special.
Clouds are looking a little bit heavier all the time. What more has the day got to offer? It's some
rain.
Bill, you're an eternal pessimist about this rain. I know
My wife, who is about 100 miles from here, in the direction where the rain is coming from, has just described it.
Well, you see,
extremely heavy. It's the third highest score by an Englishman in this. Well, not all English. Robin Smith wasn't, but for England, in limited overseas international, Smith 167 not out, Gower 158, and it's taken him 204 minutes, 126 balls, 19 fours.
Yes, it is a third. Robin and Smith did play for England every now and then. Bill, you're all right.
It wasn't English.
386 for 3. I'll send him round to see you later, Bill.
The heartiest congratulations of everybody connected with Test Match Special, including, I'm sure, our listeners, to Bill Frindall, MBE. Bill, many congrats.
Thank you very much, Christopher. No, it was a bit of a shock. It's a great honour. I think I'm only the second scorer after the late Bill Ferguson in Australia to get a gong. He got the BEM back in the 50s. No, it's a wonderful accolade for all scorers, I think.
I'm sure that is the case, absolutely. No game of cricket can proceed without them, so well done. You're the doyen. I look to Bill Frindall, MBE, complete with a bottle of champagne that was presented to him at tea time by a couple of very attractive young Empire ladies, I think. Bill looked like the cat who'd got the cream.
It's been a quite horrible day, yes.
Well, your penance, Bill, is to tell me, please, the highest score to have...
The new record was set by the West Indies against Australia a couple of winters ago. I will get the scorecard for you.
Thank you very much.
Are you ready for a sensational fact?
Yes, we're always
desperate for one, Bill.
Collingwood is the first to score 100 and take 4 wickets in the same match for England.
In the limited overs international for England.
Yep, he's the first England player to do it. There have been 8 others from various countries.
I think that's quite a good one.
Yes, it is, isn't it? He did well. Yes, you...
for this time of night.
The bearded wonder lived up to his name.
There we go, some typical classic Frindallian contributions. As I say, so much more than simply a scorer, although of course that really was his forte. He excelled, he was so accurate, you knew what every information he gave you was always going to be spot on. Just occasionally, of course, you'd just glimpse possibly that little pot of Tipex coming out, which is some glee you'd notice. He would just very quietly gloss over his score sheet. They'd make a little bit of an error, but he was the best, and we've all been very, very, very lucky indeed to work with Bill. Victor, let's start with you first of all, sitting here. I know we talked at the start of play about Bill, but I mean, I just don't see how working and doing this job without Bill Frindall it could ever be the same again.
No, it won't. I mean, I can remember one occasion where I think you were operating in the commentary box, and it was not a test match, it was a match at Bristol, and I brought along a work experience guy, and we're talking someone of a different generation to Bill. He was 17. And I took him around into the press box. It was at Bristol. I went to the press box and introduced him to one or two. I brought him into the commentary box and introduced him probably to you and CMJ and indeed Bill. And he had quite a nice day. I thought I did quite well. Anyway, I took him back to his father that night, who said, "Hey, how'd it go?" He said, do you know, I met Bill Frindall, he said. And I was slightly taken aback by this, as you would be. But I don't know, it's just a demonstration that actually Bill reached out to people without, I mean, essentially, scoring does, as we've said, seem a pretty boring occupation. But this had made his day. Two things. Bill sort of captured the imagination of some people, even teenagers. But the other thing that I remember from that day, and lots of other occasions as well, we're in the box, and as you know, we get lots of people coming in, some high and mighty, some we don't recognise and we don't quite know who they are. Didn't make a jot of difference to Bill whether they were ex-prime ministers or someone he didn't quite recognise who may have been lost, but who happened to be. Bill would be just as welcoming to the second category, and provided he had time in between scoring, putting the dots in, he would be just as welcoming to those sort of people as he would to, I don't know, John Major, Tim Rice, or whoever comes into the box. And that, you know, that speaks well of him, doesn't it? He had no sort of ego. He loved the game, but he wasn't full of himself or self-importance, and he would be, as I say, he was clearly very friendly to this unknown 17-year-old I took into the box one time, just as he would to anyone else who is, you know, in essence a nobody. But no, Bill, well, welcome in. What are you doing here? And just a natural friendliness. Yeah. And he also, he seemed to mellow too a bit as he got older. He was, so it will be so strange going back to England next summer, first Test match. Didn't miss a Test match in England from the day he got the job in 1966. Didn't miss one home Test match. What's it going to be like? I don't know. Not only for us, but for people listening. Yeah. When we get back there.
Let's bring in Peter Baxter there in London. I think, Peter, good morning to you, by the way, or good evening.
Good evening.
Great to have you with us. Although obviously in a very, very sad situation. I think before we really sort of delve into Bill, if you like, I mean your instant sort of thoughts about Bill.
Well, very interesting. When Victor was talking about his work experience person, I was remembering Lord Tebbit, you may remember, coming on to do a view from the boundary, and the highlight of his day was sitting at Bill's elbow and watching him score for about an hour after the lunch interval. But I first met him way back in 1966, which was the year he started. I went into the Test match special box on duty for the first time at the end of that season, and Bill had already set out his stall in the corner, the territorial area that he commanded, and woe betide any of us if we infringed on it, and certainly if we looked like spilling anything on any of his score sheets. So I certainly remember all that, and of course he was still there in the corner of the box when I finally left it.
Yes. Rory Bremner, greetings. Thank you for joining us too. You were actually with Bill, I think, in Dubai when he caught this dreadful disease.
That's right. No, he was doing his own commentary and his own score sheets. But what was amazing, this is only what Mike Gatting would call sort of hit and giggle cricket. It was just sort of limited over against some baggage handlers and clerks from Emirates Airline. But he had all the notes and all of his pieces he'd torn out of his books, or not torn out, cut out of his books. So all of the players, and he had details on them. And actually, you've forgotten the style in which he wrote his books. It was he was you'd think as a scorer he'd be quite sort of dry and dull, but he had such a wry and mischievous sense of humour. And I remember reading about John Price, you remember the former England bowler, and he was talking about how he'd run in on two long sides of a triangle before walking back along the shorter hypotenuse, and this kind of stuff. And actually, it's so ironic. I mean, he was his big worry about playing at Sharjah, which is where we played the games, and I remember terribly worried the day before. He said I didn't know how he was going to cope in Sharjah without falling over water, as he called it.
It's dry,
of course, Sharjah, Sharjah is dry, and I think Debbie, his wife, said that it was his first dry lunch for 30 years. So he, so I mean, there was such a, but also how he was so good at his job. I mean, it was so typical when you were talking about him being awarded the MBE, and his first response is, the first scorer to be awarded the MBE since so back in 1953, and out came all the details, and it was that mastery of detail that combined. I was talking to Stephen Fry actually on Friday, just after we'd heard the news, and we both agreed that he'd be missed beyond measure, but of course if anybody could measure it, it would be Bill. Because he was so good at that.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're going to talk about his contribution to the Taverners in a minute, Rory. But actually, you're a good person to sort of represent just the man in the street, the cricket fan, in all of this as well, isn't it? Because we were all very lucky enough to work with Bill and to know him through cricket.
Yeah.
But I suppose that the first time you'd have got to know of Bill Frindall, being a cricket enthusiast, was listening to Test Match Special.
Yeah, well, I think it was Test Match Special, absolutely, and through the Taverners, and Brian Johnston, who got me involved with all that. And so I remember him through Games Day. He was also a very good impressionist as well. He'd love to do John Arlott impressions from the Boundary, talking about, that cut was so late it was almost posthumous.
He'll be very pleased to hear you acknowledge his impersonations.
No, very good, a great impressionist, I think. But also, actually, I gave a quotation to somebody about saying he was one of the great characters, and the Press Association miswrote it as one of the great cricketers. He wasn't one of the great cricketers. He was a good cricketer. He was a very useful bowler, actually. He was sort of surprisingly sort of bustling, sort of medium-paced bowler. But I think most of it was his love of the game. And I was trying to think about this, and he just gave the impression whenever I saw him sort of work that he would have actually done that job for the price of admission, really, because he just so loved to be among the people that he was with. He loved to be in the box with Johners and Arlott and you and all the people that are there, and to be close to the cricketers and the people that you met. And he just loved to be part of that. And of course, his access to that was this phenomenal ability of his concentration, which you've spoken about. And it all sort of came together in this package. And he was the kind of character in the corner who would just come in with occasional witty, pithy comments, but so much part of the team. And as you say, he'll be very much missed for that. And I think people related to him. People in the street, very much related to him. They knew he was a living archive in a way, wasn't it? It's you think of it rather like the Great Library of Constantinople. You think of all the facts and stories that have gone with him, really.
So, Peter, take us back. I mean, 1966 seems an age ago, and that's the vast age that he scored at length of time. He scored 4 for Test Match Special. Was the programme very different then? And how did Bill first get into it?
We got into it because Arthur Wrigley, who was the sort of father of broadcast scoring, died suddenly, and Bill had just come out of the RAF. And he owed the RAF, he reckoned, that concentration that Rory just mentioned, because he was trained in the NATO War Room. It's a frightening thought in itself, at Fontainebleau. And when he first came in, he'd had a few trial matches. I think he did a tour match at Worcester early on with John Arlott. And Arlott said, "You have a scorer's mind. You focus on the play and obliterate everything else." And really, I think that was what we all noticed. I mean, see Bill just get up in the middle of an over, go to the back of the commentary box, pour himself a cup of coffee, and come back to his score sheets and just record those last 3 balls all the time. Absolute concentration. And of course, we refer to his recall of records. Of course, he'd written most of the record books himself, yes. So he knew exactly where to look for those records. And of course, a famous welcome that Arlott gave him when he first joined. "I hear you like driving. Well, I like drinking. We're going to get on." Because he acted as his chauffeur for so long. And Arlott, I remember Arlott arriving with a great twinkle in his eye. That he just had a great example of the very dry Frindell wit. In that, as they drove up the M1, Arlott had looked at some skid marks, rather long and rather frightening looking skid marks on the motorway that disappeared into the verge, and said, "My goodness, Bill, look at those." And Bill just laconically as ever said, "Oh yeah, they just paint them on the road to scare people."
Did he have this system in place by then? I must say, Peter, I think you are probably the only person other than Bill who could actually understand most of this incredible system that, of course, was taking place alongside us on the commentary bench, as it were. Was he already using it then?
He used it right from the start. He refined the system that Arthur Wrigley used, in fact, and I don't think even Arthur Wrigley was the inventor of it. I think it may have come from Australia originally, but Arthur Wrigley certainly used it for the broadcasting scoring. It's the linear system, I think they call it, where you know which bowler has bowled to which batsman all the time and how many balls he's bowled and all that sort of thing. That sort of recall is ideal for a commentator, obviously, because you can have an idea that Peterson hasn't faced Ben much this morning, and you just have to glance over or ask the scorer, and he can tell you exactly how many balls he's bowled to Peterson, and that is easily recorded. Number of balls faced, number of fours is very simple in that system, and that's why they use it. Bill refined it and even produced his own version, a sort of printed sheet of it. But I tell you one thing that he invented that I only just remembered the other day. Do you remember the Frindometer?
Oh yes.
I arrived at Headingley once, and they'd just been doing some rebuilding, when hadn't they? And I sat in the commentary box on the day before the Test match and realised we couldn't see a scoreboard out of it. There was just no scoreboard to be seen. And I told this to Bill over dinner that night and said, I think we've got a bit of a problem. And he beavered away in his hotel room that night and invented this scoreboard out of cardboard made out of the laundry list in his room. And we had a working scoreboard operated by Frindell in the box, and we christened it the Frindometer.
And it was accurate too, of course, wasn't it?
It was accurate. Well, if he ever said the scoreboard was wrong, we believed him, not the scoreboard.
Absolutely. And to go back to that system again, I mean, that from sort of my perspective as doing the job that I do, I could just say to Bill at 4 o'clock on an afternoon. At Lord's, Bill, when was it, or which over was it that I don't know, use people playing today, Taylor got one past the outside edge at Strauss and it just went down between the wicketkeeper and the slip. It was almost a half chance. You can remember what it was. I think he was bowling from the pavilion end, and it would take him 30 seconds to go through and tell exactly which over it was, exactly which end it was, what the time of day. I mean, it was a fantastic system.
Well, that was the refinement that he did to the Wrigley system, where he had this little code over the top of each ball bowled and what had happened to it. There'd be a little number which told you exactly in what direction it was played, or some other little symbol to show that it was a played and missed, or a bouncer. That was another one. A little arrow going upwards was a bouncer. Things like that were all shown in there. He could tell you how many bouncers so-and-so's bowled.
First thing is he got to the commentary box in Sharjah last month, and he immediately said, "No, right now, what are the ends called here? Which end's which?" And he was trying to work. We decided one would be called the mosque end, but in fact it was Industrial Road End, and that was the first thing that went into his book. Well, it was in Industrial Road End became the thing, and it went into the book, and he took it with as much seriousness and as much humour as he did the day job.
Yeah. Was cricket made for Bill in a way? I mean, can you imagine another sport that someone of Bill's mind might have embraced as much as cricket? What do you think, Rory?
I don't know. I suppose the concentration of poker or something like that. You'd have to think about a card game or whatever, because I suppose the thing about cricket is it's so endlessly fascinating in terms of its statistics. I can't think of another game where, I mean, Wisden. But he was, of course, a living Wisden, wasn't he? And I mean, that sort of volume grows year by year. But those kind of records, I mean, he was ideally suited to all of that. And on the top of my head, I mean, the goals and characters in football and tries in rugby, but the mathematics of cricket, the longest partnership for the sixth wicket between two players on the subcontinent. That's quite uniquely cricket, isn't it?
What do you think, Peter?
Yes, I think all other sports that have records, and goodness me, we've just seen the Super Bowl in America, and they have legions of statistics, but they're all slightly artificial, number of yards run, that sort of thing, as in most of these things. Whereas cricket, the statistics to a certain extent are the game. I can't imagine there could be another sport in which a scorer could become a hero, really, and so famous as Bill.
Yeah. I know Blowers is listening in as well. Henry, good day to you from here. Good to have you with us.
My dear old thing, lovely to hear you, but in such a sad circumstances there.
Indeed, absolutely. I mean, your memories of Bill.
Well, I think the one thing which I don't think you touched on yet was his incredible neatness. I mean, every score sheet that he produced was a work of art on its own. And I mean, everyone who came into the box, taking Vic's point early on, not only did they all want to go and look at what Bill was doing, Bill always had a word for everyone, and even in amongst his scoring, he said, "Oh, well, hang on a moment," and then he would have a word. But even doing all this, the neatness was simply phenomenal, wasn't it? I mean, every single score sheet. I remember desperately once at Lord's when I spilt some water on one, and dear oh dear, I wish the whole heavens had opened up and had swallowed me, because I don't think he spoke to me for about a month afterwards. But he was, wasn't he? He was incredibly neat. And also, I mean, Bill had a splendid sense of humour, and the lovely waspish remarks. I mean, we all, didn't we, ganged up against him and tried to catch him out, and he was practically foolproof. I mean, just very occasionally he'll slip up, but we tried to ask him questions that he wouldn't know the answer to, and you know, he practically never failed us, did he?
No, he didn't. He could be quite stern, couldn't he? I mean, if you got things wrong, he would pick you up.
Well, yes, I think this was because of his phenomenal... One reason for his sternness was his phenomenal concentration. He didn't want anyone to break it. And he was an absolute stickler. He was a perfectionist, wasn't he? I mean, he was a stickler for detail. Everything had to be absolutely right. I mean, the fact that Bill said, yes, Robin Smith was not an Englishman, that was exactly Bill. And the fact that the Australia versus the rest of the world, he refused to count as a test match, didn't he? I mean, Shane Warne, I think, got his 700th wicket during the course of it. I think it was his 700th, wasn't it? But Bill wouldn't accept this.
Yes, I was going to come on to that. You make a good point, Blowers. I mean, for all this scoring and affability and so on, and the comments in the box, he actually was quite a campaigner, wasn't he, Peter?
Yes, I was just thinking he would have approved of that latest move by the ICC to say that a test match once forfeited remains forfeited and can't be then politically taken back. Yes, he certainly get very steamed up about those things, and some of his campaigns had worked, and who knows, his campaign to say that so-called test match in Melbourne won't be a test match in the future will probably bear fruit, because I think he felt the same about the rest of the world matches in 1970, that they shouldn't be test matches, and duly the ICC said, right, they're not test matches. I mean, he was meticulous in things like that, as well as in his presentation. I was just thinking, when you mentioned the neatness, he was actually trained as an architect before he did his national service in the RAF, and I think some of that came out in the neatness. But I did once say to him, I think possibly I was a bit exasperated about something, and I suggested, look, I don't care, Bill, if you just write the bowling figures on the back of an envelope or a fag packet. And I could see that I'd really hurt his whole soul by saying this.
Yes. The broadcasting, Peter, I mean, was he... because people will know that certainly for the last 10 years or so, he operated on a microphone which he had to press a button to operate, and so he didn't have the sort of open microphone that we all have, whereas I think when he started off, he did, didn't he?
Well, it was a lengthy battle, exactly how to cope with it. If he had the microphone open all the time, it would inevitably be hit by his score cards, those boards that he had, and so there was a constant bashing sound and rustling and all the rest of it. And I did have this conversation with him on many occasions, and he said, look, I'm far too busy, I can't be bothered, I can't get involved in trying to worry about the open mic. It's got to be ready when I need it. So the switched lip microphone was actually something of a triumph, because it was then ready. It also was a clue to you that he had something to say.
Yes.
When the microphone was waved, perhaps a little threateningly at you, you knew that you were going to have to call him in, but at least you could choose the timing of bringing him in. But no, it went right back to the start. I think in his earliest days he had a little system where he pressed a button to which lit up a signal for the engineers to tell them that he needed to use his microphone. They had to respond to this signal by pressing another button which gave him a red light, and then he could speak. But this depended on the engineers watching the light all the time, and so I think it lasted about 3 test matches.
Yes. We rather used him as a prop, didn't we, Blowers, if we're honest? I mean, if play was slow or whatever, it was always a time to turn to our left.
Well, yes, because we could rely on him totally. He never let us down, did he? I mean, he was absolutely infallible, and I mean, whoever succeeds him is going to have a tremendous task to live up to him. But you know, one of the things I'm going to miss most of all when we start in Cardiff in the first test against Australia was Bill's sort of irresistible chuckle in the background, which listeners will have heard many times. I mean, sometimes as many as 3 times and over. When someone said something that Bill found funny, it was a lovely sort of throaty laugh, wasn't it? And I'm sure all listeners would have loved that.
It was also, if you listen to the leg over incident, it was one of his many snorts that actually set poor old Johners off, wasn't it? Because any possible double entendre or interpretation of a pun or whatever you want, Bill was always first on it. And if you
I think, Aggers, you're trying to give him some of the responsibility, aren't you?
I think he'd be pleased
from yourself.
It was a beautifully timed snort, wasn't it?
The bearded wonder bit. That was Johners, wasn't it? Was he always the bearded wonders? When did that come about?
When Johners joined the commentary team in the 70s, because as Blur said, he was, I can say, he was a bit of a prop, and Johners' commentary was sort of a good sort of encompassing variety act, if you like, and so the bearded wonder became inevitably Bearders, because everyone did with Johners. But yes, he was created really as a character by Johners.
I often wondered if he wanted to shave the beard off ever. He woke up one morning and thought, I'll shave this off, and I thought, well, I can't. I mean,
well, not when the Beard Liberation Front made him Beard of the Year.
No, did they really?
Didn't he start with a handlebar moustache?
When he was in the RAF, that's right, he did.
What was his, when he came to his first test match, what was the state of his hair like then, his fungus?
I think the beard had arrived, because it was very black and threatening in those days. It was a little greyer the last time we saw him.
Maybe the beard.
Rory, tell us about his work with the Taverners, because again, I mean, we talk about Bill. I mean, there's so much more to Bill, as we've already discovered in the last half an hour, that there's simply a scorer. And I mean, he was a tireless campaigner.
Absolutely, he was tremendously loyal Taverner. He's always turning out for whenever I went to dinners and things. He was always there, and so many of the matches and the games. And as I say, this trip that we went on just a couple of weeks ago, he was very much, he was in the thick of it, and he just seemed to love to. I mean, the whole point of the Taverners is people who love cricket and giving something back, but cricket would have taken him away from home a lot of the time, and to put the amount of time that he did to the charity games is the cause of the Taverners. And of course, I ought to mention Debbie in this, yes, because she was with him on the trip, and between the two of them, whenever I saw them, I always saw them together, and both of them, I think they became really very, very loyal and constantly present supporters of the Taverners. They were really they were there for so many events up and down the country, and helping that link really between those people who love cricket and those people who are raising money for all these good causes.
Yeah, lots of emails coming in, and we're trying to read one or two out. tms@bbc.co.uk. Steve, well, here we go. He said, the reason I emailed is that for me there are no words to explain how much Bill will be missed. He inspired us all. He says, quick, witty, intelligent, always had his finger on the button. Bill was and will always be one of us who's the best, and there'll be another voice like Bill's, emanating with passion and fun, coming out of my radio. Thank you, Steve, very much for that. In fact, for all of you, it's ticking away in front of me here to have that. Excellent. The blind as well, Peter. Again, that was something very much that was a passion of his. Blind sport.
Indeed. Well, he was president of British Blind Sport, and I had a little bit to do with him in those circumstances, because I'm president of Metro Blind Sport in succession to Brian Johnston, and he really told me more about the game of blind cricket than anybody else, so how they play it with the bell and the ball, and how the different codes from different countries had to come together before they could have their first ever Blind World Cup. Yes, he was, because we're talking about, I think it was the Taverners that he was raising money for, when he was encouraged to dress as an Arab for a day's play.
What was that all about?
Well, he went to a party during an Oval Test match, and he was, someone said, if you wear this Arab costume, for a day scoring in the commentary box, I will make a substantial donation to the Taverners. And so Bill rolled up the next morning in the full dish dash with the headdress and the dark glasses, parked his car in his usual spot, and the attendant rushed out and said, no, you can't park there, that's where Mr. Frindall parks. And Frindall, in his Arab gear, said, but I've just bought the Oval. And I think the first commentator on in the morning was a little alarmed to see this sunglassed Arab sitting there at Bill's score sheets.
He'd be the Burkard wonder, wouldn't he?
He'd be the Burkard wonder. Yes.
Well, thanks.
One other thing I just thought, just at the end of play when they came off for lunch just now, I thought the sound that you will miss in the commentary box is the 3 clicks of the 3 stopwatches as they walked off to lunch. There was always the 3 stopwatches on that board, one for each batsman and one for the innings. It would click, 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 never missed.
It's a shame that he's not. He would sort of say, Bill. He was around for 69 years, scored in 377 tests, got through 6,432 sheets of A4 paper, drank 260 litres of coffee, 83 gallons of wine, and enjoyed every minute.
Yes,
I think on that line we'll leave it. Peter Baxter, Rory Bremner, Henry Blofeld, thank you all very much.